Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got fellow CLNS guest Derek Bodner on the show and fellow writer over at The Athletic, senior writer even. He's launching the Philadelphia side. He's doing a great job with it. I think all of their content so far has been, exactly what I could have hoped for if I was a Philadelphia fan. They do an awesome job of hitting all of the angles from a very unique standpoint. So Derek, how's it going, buddy?
It's going well. You know, it's kind of funny. Our paths overlap a lot now between CLNS and The Athletic. I was actually up in Boston. I met the CLNS team the other day, which was a first. But between you and Danny and like the team that we have at both those places, I feel really strongly about.
Yeah, no, it's great to be a part of that. And Derek, we're going to talk about, for my money, I would say one of the most interesting teams in the NBA, if not the most interesting team in the NBA right now to me, just because, you know, the Warriors, we know what the Warriors are. Boston is interesting in a lot of ways, but they were expected to be good after getting the number one seed overall last year. The 76ers, I feel like, were a relatively, I don't want to say unknown quantity coming into the year just because they were so talented, but I think it's reflected in the fact that, you know, they were set up for what I think a 40.5 over under in terms of win total. Could have gone either way, it seems like. And right now it seems like it's going to go the positive way, where they're sitting at 12-9 right now. They're fifth in the Eastern Conference, well on their way to the playoffs, in my opinion. So the first overarching question I have for you, Derek, is how did this happen? How did this come together as quickly as it has?
Yeah, you know, it's funny you mentioned the over-under because I had them, you know, they set the over-under at 40.5. I thought that was right about on point. I was thinking 39, 40, 41. And you looked at the schedule and you said, okay, there's a road-heavy portion of the schedule, 10 of the first 14 on the road. They've already played Houston twice, Golden State twice, Boston twice. Like, they have a lot of Cleveland they've played. They have a lot of their difficult games out of the way, and here they are 12-9. So I look at the over-under now, and where I thought that was right on point. I think the over is very much in play. And you bring up uncertainty or unknown. And unknown might not be where I would go, but uncertain certainly is. Because you have so much. Like, I'm confident Ben Simmons was going to be a good NBA player. I wasn't confident he was going to be this good out of the gate from day one. I'm confident Joel Embiid is going to be a great player. I didn't have confidence he would be playing pretty much every day. I think he's missed 3 games so far, 3 out of 21, and he's playing 30 minutes a night. And I wasn't even confident he was going to stay healthy. Like, there's just so much uncertainty with him, even if the known is pretty strong. So I think those are 2 things I would look at right away. You know, Embiid's playing far more than I think anybody really expected. He's played through some soreness. He's played not yet on back-to-backs, but he's playing, like I said, 30 minutes a night, which I didn't know if he would play that at the end of the year, much less at the beginning. You know, he came in and they were talking teens at the beginning, and they blew that right out of the water. So I think those 2 are where I would start. And if you would have told me that Ben Simmons was going to look this good and that Joel Embiid was going to be playing this much, then I would have said, okay, I'm going to take the over on that over-under. The other thing is Covington has been exceptional. He's hit a little bit of a rough patch here, which, shooters do. I knew right from the moment he signed that renegotiating extension, great. There's going to be a period where he's not going to be shooting 50% from the field because high-volume shooters don't shoot 50% from the field. And when he hits that slow spell, like, people are going to bring out, oh, well, he got paid, and now he's struggling because that's how shooting works. But I knew it was coming. You knew the slump was coming. He's in it now. But he's been fantastic on the whole. J.J. Redick's been up and down, but when he's on, he can win you a game, as he did the other night against Orlando. Amir Johnson has been one of the surprises, too, and TJ continues to get better. So just a lot of internal development, I think, mixed in with a couple of veterans who are, by and large, producing. And Amir kind of struggled at the beginning, but he turned it around of late. So far, it's worked out well. Yeah,
it really has. And you kind of mentioned the schedule, right? So according to Basketball Reference, their strength of schedule is the hardest so far in the NBA through their first 21 games. That I think bodes exceedingly well. The fact that they're at 12-9 with a positive net rating now on that schedule, it's going to ease up going forward, especially playing in the Eastern Conference. I think the East has been a little bit better than what we anticipated it being coming into the year, but it's still not necessarily is strong from a talent perspective as the West. So I think that we're going to keep seeing this 76ers team. Actually, I think they have like a shot at like 47, 48 wins right now. A lot of it is dependent on the lingering uncertainty that is Joel Embiid and how much they rest him going forward, how often they try and get him nights off. But at the end of the day, this team is further along than what I think anyone could have anticipated. And I think that the biggest reason that they're this far along probably is Ben Simmons. So let's just kind of start there. Every time I watch Ben Simmons, I get more impressed with just the physical combination of his athleticism at his size. It's basically impossible to go under screens on him. I think teams are starting to kind of realize it. Like, for instance, in the Portland game, Portland just started going under everything. They guarded him with Harkless a lot of the time at the beginning of the game, and he just destroyed them. Like, he would get that first step. His first step is so long and so quick that he's going to get the angle on you basically immediately. And if you go under that screen, it's either a shot at the rim for him, or it's going to lead to a help defender having to come over, and he's such a good passer that he's going to find the open guy. That has probably been the place where I have been most surprised with how early he has come along in his process. The rest of the game, his defense has been better than what I thought it would be. His scoring efficiency for a guy who is a non-shooter has been better than what I thought it would be. The rebounding, I thought he'd be a great rebounder. I don't really know if that was, a surprise to anyone. What has impressed you so far about what you've seen from Ben Simmons?
Yeah, I mean, we sit there and we watch him at LSU. We watch him leading up to his college season. You go, that's a great athlete. Like, him being a great athlete isn't a surprise, but I think sometimes the degree gets lost a little bit, especially when he sits out for a year and a half with that. Like, you knew he was a great athlete, but just the sheer size and physicality and the strength and the straight line speed and the first step, I think I forgot a little bit the exact degree to which he was a great athlete. And I think another thing we say a lot, like, NBA spacing is going to help him out a lot. And certainly at LSU, I said, man, he gets into an NBA offense with real shooters at every position. That's going to help him out a ton. But I don't think I necessarily quantified ton quite enough, because he gets in here now. And like you said, if you go under the screen, under the pick and roll, he has so much speed coming at the rim, and he's so strong and he's so physical that you might even be able to recover back and contest it. But he is, I mean, he's just, that's a 6'10" guy with a head of steam. He's very hard to stop. And I think Joel Embiid having the kind of gravity that he has, not only when he's out at the 3-point line, but I mean, Joel Embiid could be at the elbow, or he could be at the, at the low block. Defenders don't rotate off of him because they're scared to death of Ben Simmons making that pass and Embiid getting that easy shot. He just commands so much attention that it really opens things up for Simmons. I checked not too long ago, and I think Simmons had his field goal percentage was about 10% higher when Embiid was on the court. Now, there's some noise to that because a lot of those minutes are with, Robert Covington and JJ Redick too. But I do think Embiid helps open things up for Simmons, and just having, I mean, when you have Saric, who's up and down with his shot, but he at least needs to be guarded out there, and Redick and Covington and Embiid, that's a far easier atmosphere to have success against, even for a guy of elite athleticism, than it was at LSU, especially after Hornsby went down. So I think these are all things that I conceptually understood coming into the season. Like, I don't think there's anything about his game that I didn't see, but I think I just forgot the degree to which it would help him. And he's been fantastic. He still, by and large, finishes almost entirely with his right hand. Teams haven't really overplayed him to that degree yet. He still has a lot of the weaknesses. He doesn't shoot beyond 15 feet. Even lately, he's not shooting at 15 feet. Teams just can't stop his strengths right now, and it's been really impressive to watch.
What do you think the best strategy is to try and defend him right now? Like, part of me wants to say that you should just kind of blitz him in pick and rolls and force him out of his comfort zone a little bit. He's been a little bit turnover prone. He can get a little bit wild with passing, and he's not like the most incredible ball handler. Like, he's not like a 6'3" true point guard as a ball handler. He is still like a 6'10" guy who has a relatively higher dribble just because of that size.
Right.
What do you think the best way to defend him is? Like, I think I would kind of lean toward like blitzing him and kind of forcing turnovers, but I'm not entirely sure, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, after the Sixers had a run where they played Golden State and Cleveland in a relatively short span, and both of those teams, first of all, it was the second time for Golden State that they saw him, and they both kind of went over the screen, which is a little bit not what you would expect with a guy that has that kind of a weakness in his outside shot and is that athletic. But because that didn't allow him to get up that head of steam, he wasn't as effective. And there was a lot of talk whether or not that's going to be the new strategy. And I think really what we're saying there is a new strategy is to get Draymond Green or Jay Crowder, because there just aren't very many guys that are as big as Simmons who can also move their feet reasonably well to keep up with him like that. So I'm not sure that's necessarily going to be a solution for everybody, but I do think if you have a guy like Draymond or like Crowder with smart team defenders around him, especially with the Warriors, it can work. I do think blitzing the pick and roll would be interesting. I think by and large, he should be able to recognize that in the future and pass out of that. I think it's one area where the height will really help him, but that's going to put the onus on his teammates. And, a guy like when he shares a court with TJ McConnell, he'll probably be able to help a little bit and attack that defensive rotation. Dario Saric can, but a guy like Embiid, as good as he can be passing the ball at times, he can still the ball stops a little bit and he takes some time to process. No pun intended. So I think that's going to be largely that's going to shift a lot of the onus to his teammates, which, especially with their youth, might be an effective strategy now. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the best long-term way to stop him is. Yeah, but it will be a fun chess match to watch, and it'll be fun to watch whether or not he can correct some of these glaring weaknesses too.
Yeah, I guess that's my thing. I don't think that blitzing him is a long-term strategy in the pick and roll. I think he will figure it out eventually. I think you could also do stuff just like putting him with a second ball handler, like TJ on the floor. They don't really do that all that often in their starting lineups, but I think that they could do that, as an adjustment to teams that employ that strategy and probably at least mitigate it somewhat. But the thing for me is, again, kind of what you said, you take the ball out of his hands. And I think that has inherent value because, the next question that I wanted to ask you before I kind of moved on to other guys is, where do you think Ben is at this stage in the hierarchy of the NBA? I kind of think he's already a top 30 player in the league. And I don't think I'm exaggerating saying that. So anytime you can get the ball out of a top 30 player's hands, I'm kind of in on that,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a great question. I haven't spent a whole lot of time, trying to rank him in the overall league hierarchy. Top 30 sounds about right, though, and that sounds pretty absurd for a rookie. Have two rookies. It sounds very absurd for a rookie, but I don't think it's with the way he's impacting the game all around. And to be honest, the way he's been effective in the half court, which I don't think I saw coming right away. We all knew that he would be able to push the ball in transition, force turnovers, get rebounds, and kill you in that regard. But he's been far more effective, and he's combated a lot of the defensive strategies far quicker than I think I would have expected. So yeah, I think top 30 probably sounds about right. I'd have to really sit down and think about it more, but I think ballparking, that's a pretty fair estimation.
Yeah, and the fact that we're here already with Ben Simmons talking about this is just totally wild to me. There have been 15 players 15 player seasons in NBA history where a guy has gone for 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 7 assists. I want to say that 2 of those were Larry Bird. I'm looking at it now. 2 of those were Larry Bird. 2 of them were Wilt Chamberlain. And 4 of them were Oscar Robertson, and 2 of them were Russell Westbrook. So under 10 guys in NBA history have gone for what Ben Simmons is doing over the course of a full year. I don't know.
There aren't any fluky outlier guys either. There's no Boris Diaw who randomly did it one year too. Yeah, it's a good company.
No, the worst player is probably Fat Lever or Grant Hill, both of whom were all-star players. And the rest of them are top 10 players in NBA history to have done this. So the fact that Ben's doing this 21, and he is, I believe, the youngest player to have done it. Now just kind of looking through this, it speaks a lot to where he is as an overall player. And we'll see if he keeps this up over the long term of the season. He's obviously never played 82 highly consecutive, highly competitive games like this over the course of a 7-month span. So we'll have to see. But right now, I don't think it's out of line to kind of say Ben Simmons should be an all-star in the Eastern Conference this year.
Yeah, I mean that's, and again, I probably haven't spent as much time thinking about that as I should. It's probably something I should be writing about. But it's certainly, he is playing at that level. Let me put it to you that way.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's talk about Joel Embiid. On a permanent basis, do you think Joel Embiid has been better or worse than last season?
You know, this is funny. I watch the game and I say, okay, he's still one of the 3 or so best defenders in the NBA.
Yep.
But it seems like he's not quite the same physically. Like, I think 95% of that is he came into camp completely out of shape and he worked his way into it, and he doesn't practice all that much in between games. So it's really, what you see is kind of the in-game conditioning that he gets. And you could just see some of the special perimeter defense. Like last year, he would switch on to John Wall, and not saying that he would completely keep up with him, but it would be far more than you would expect a 7'2" guy to be able to do. It was a real strength of his. And he just seems like he's a step more in the paint. Like he switches a little less. He's a step slower to contest. He can mostly make up for that because he's 7'2" and still a good athlete, but he's just not quite as special on the perimeter as he was last year. That being said, then you go look at what he's doing at the rim, and he's every bit the rim protector he was last year, if not better. You look at the on and off numbers, and they're every bit as good, if not better. And now we're getting to the point where, you have his minutes last year, his minutes this year. It's pretty clear that they're representative. And, I think by and large, his offense has improved. The turnovers are still very much an issue. And he shows some progress in that in terms of recognizing the double team, but it'll be like one game he'll do it well, then 2 games not, and then it'll be fits and starts. I think by and large he's been better, even though it seemed like he was working himself into conditioning. This to me is close to the Joel Embiid of January last year, and for him to be able to take 7 months off and come back and still play like that, it's been an interesting season. But I think he's probably playing, if not right at the same level, then very close.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. You mentioned the rim protection. Right now, he's second among all centers in the NBA, according to the NBA's tracking numbers, in defensive field goal percentage at the rim against. That's behind Kristaps Porzingis. And by the way, he's 10% behind Kristaps Porzingis. Porzingis is turned into, I don't know, is Porzingis maybe the best rim protector in the NBA already?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the things Porzingis benefits from is he plays a lot of 4.
Yeah. That's true.
And that puts him out of position, so he doesn't contest as many. But it makes him the kind of second guy to come over and contest a shot rather than there might be 2 hands there to contest instead of just one. So I think that might help him a little bit. But Porzingis, the way he can cover ground and recover is pretty insane. They're both excellent at what they do in that regard.
Yeah, they really, really are. And, you see it particularly with the Sixers when Joel Embiid is on the floor. They have a 99.6 defensive rating. Obviously that would be first in the NBA, just as when Joel Embiid last year went out. They would have been first in the NBA in defensive rating when he was on the floor in his minutes. So he just continues to be an absolute monster defensively, just due to the impact at the rim. I think I agree with you defensively that he's not moving quite as well, but it's fine. Whenever you're a 7-foot center, you don't necessarily have to be able to check the John Walls out on the floor, and especially in a situation where Robert Covington has gotten better defensively. Saric is not as bad defensively as he was last year. I will say I think he's probably the weak link in the starting lineup defensively, even considering JJ Redick as well. But when you have Covington, you have Simmons, you have all this length that's going to just kind of cut off penetration with so much ease. It really, really helps you be able to kind of stay in the paint and do what you do best.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the length and the versatility those guys have. It's been fun watching that all kind of come together. And Covington, his development, and the fact that you can put him 1 through 4 and he can hold his own and pretty much put him on the other team's best option. Simmons being far better defensively than I think anybody had any real expectation for. This was a guy who looked completely disinterested at LSU. And look, he still has moments where his effort comes and goes, certainly where his technique comes and goes, but he's bought in far more. These are kind of the typical rookie struggles rather than indifference. And that's been a really big step. And you just look when those 3 guys are on the court, Embiid, Covington, and Simmons, they have a 95.5 defensive rating, and we're talking about 300 minutes at this point. So that's a real foundation. The other 2 guys, Saric, Redick, they're obviously weaker in terms of what they provide defensively. There's some things you have to worry about, but the other three guys, especially Covington and Simmons, they have so much versatility that Brett's done a pretty good job of overcoming that. And it'll be interesting to see who they target in free agency next year because they do have a lot of money and they have few needs. So it'll be, can you find that kind of 3-and-D two-way player to maybe complete that defensive lineup? Because if so, that group could really take off.
Speaking of that money, they gave some of that money from next offseason and from this offseason or from this season to Robert Covington over in November. I believe did that get signed November 16th? Something in that range?
Yeah, the second day it was eligible, I think.
So I think that says a lot about what Covington has brought to this team. He's been just totally remarkable to me this year as a basketball player. I did not expect this kind of true offensive growth, to be honest. Like, he is still mostly just a guy who's going to be a 3-and-D guy, but he's added like just enough off the dribble. You know what I mean? Like, before, you never wanted him to ever dribble the basketball, but now he can at least attack a closeout for 2 dribbles and not lose the ball. Like, that's actually a really, really important development in his game as an offensive player. Obviously, he's shooting 42% right now from 3. That's about 6% higher than he's ever shot, I think, over the course of a full season, 5% higher or something like that. I don't think that's going to quite keep up, as you mentioned earlier in the show, but it doesn't really matter. Whenever you're shooting 37% from 3 and you can attack closeouts relatively capably, and you're going to be an all-NBA level defender, that is just, to me, going to end up being one of the absolute best contracts in the NBA over the course of the next little while. You can give me the exact numbers off the top of your head, I'm sure, because I can't do it right now.
I think he's making 10-4 next year, and then it goes up by about $800K a year. That's just off the top of my head. So if it's 10-5, don't hold me to it. But I mean, I feel like every year you and I come on a podcast and we go, man, Covington's defense has gotten better. I just wish he got a little bit more open shots, and maybe you could see a little more efficiency from the perimeter. And certainly having Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid helps in that regard. I still think 42%, it's going to regress a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if it was above the 35, 36. Like, I could see him shooting 37, 38% from 3, even on just an absurd number of attempts. I mean, he's taking 7.4 a game right now.
Yeah. I think he will be at that level, to be honest. Like, he's just getting more open shots this year.
Yeah,
I
and
think
his range
is range, to be honest.
So deep too. Yeah, it's and you combine that with the way he's grown, and I agree with you. The dribble isn't quite as adventurous as it used to be. It's still not. Like, you're not going to want to ISO Robert Covington ever.
No.
But attacking closeout, getting to the rim, even just a 1 or 2 dribble pull-up jumper, which is something he didn't really have in his game in prior years. Like, the footwork just wasn't there to set up that shot. He's shown a comfort level doing that now. And again, he's never going to grow too far beyond that. Like, he's 26 or 27 at this point. But just the continued, incremental improvements is exactly what you want to see from a guy like that, and a guy who now is going to be a big part of your future for the next 4 years after this one.
Yeah, I can't really say enough about how much I enjoy Robert Covington, and I think that you're starting to see a little bit more in the NBA draft. How the hell did this guy go undrafted, first and foremost? It's kind of crazy. Like, a 6'9" guy who can shoot threes, and like, he's always been able to shoot threes. Like, that's not a new development in his game. And be that versatile athletically. I think that you're going to start seeing more of a trickle-down effect in regard to the Covington effect in the NBA draft. Like, guys who are versatile defensively and who can shoot threes are going to be absolutely, and again, no pun intended, coveted by NBA organizations just due to the way that Robert Covington and others like him impact the game.
Yeah, and I mean, Covington kind of came in the league at the right time, too, right? Like 2013, or the wrong time for his drafted, but the right time for his playing time. Back in 2013, there was still kind of a stigma against taking 7 3-pointers a game. Like, people just, as much as we talked about the 3-point shot, like, there was still a theoretical upper limit to, like, hey, buddy, you got to diversify your game. You got to get to the rim more. You got to create more off the dribble. You can't be so reliant on that perimeter shot. And I think now that's much more accepted. Now, pretty much any team in the league is thinking, okay, how can we get more 3-point shots up? So I think Covington coming in now, it's part that people are going to see his success and look for his archetype a little bit more, but also just his archetype is being looked for more because that's where the game's gone. So it's worked out well for him.
Yeah, it really has. Let's pay some bills. Holiday cash, you need it, and I know where to get it. MyBookie is the place to score serious cash on your sports predictions. Believe it or not, the holidays are just around the corner, and while that means plenty of parties, gifts, and spending, it also means there's lots of football, basketball, and hockey games you can score big on every single day. Man up and play like the pros on game day. You can play the money line, side, or total. MyBookie is your hookup for all your betting needs and offers super fast payouts when you win. Where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on. And if you want to make money betting on the games, you go to mybookie.ag. They're the only site I would recommend. I trust them, but you don't have to take my word for it. Check it out yourself. They have odds on every matchup in a mobile site that makes wagering on your smartphone a breeze. Join now, and MyBookie will match your deposit with up to a 50% bonus. Use the promo code GAMETHEORY, that's GAMETHEORY, to activate this offer. Visit mybookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid at MyBookie. Our second sponsor is DraftKings. Listen up, Hoops fans. Basketball season is back, and now that your favorite hardwood heroes have returned to action, it's time for you to put your fantasy knowledge to the test to win huge cash prizes every night playing one-day fantasy basketball at DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, there are so many ways to play. Choose from public contests with huge cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against your friends. They've even got beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of similar skill level. The best part, you get to draft a new team every day, and drafting a team is the best part of fantasy. The only thing better is winning cash doing it. Huge cash prizes await every single night only at DraftKings. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com to play free with your first deposit for your share of $10,000 in total cash prizes tonight. Don't wait. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com now to choose your lineup, and you can seriously cash in tonight. That's code CLNS only at DraftKings.com. The game inside the game. Let's move on, though. Before we start talking about some of the role players here, I want to ask about Markelle Fultz. It seems like there's not really been much movement there, but I did see that Brett Brown said like he's going to have to show me that he can like shoot free throws and shoot three-pointers confidently now before I let him back on the floor in an NBA game. Where are you at with the whole Markelle Fultz situation? Like, it's a very complex, complicated kind of deal, I feel.
It's a very strange deal.
It is, yeah. I can't remember anything really like this.
No, of all the things I was worried about heading into the season, Markelle Fultz being willing to take a jump shot was definitely not one of them. That one came out of left field. You know, I think probably a couple things happened. I think, first of all, I think he did, you know, his camp right now is saying, oh, this is all shoulder. And the Sixers are saying, well, you know, he came into camp with a different jump shot. Brett Brown came straight out and said, like, he made that a priority this offseason was to tweak his jump shot. I think he probably changed it. I think there was probably he maybe didn't give quite enough time, and I don't know how much he changed it. Like, I don't think there's no part of me that believes that what we ended up seeing during his 4-game stint in the regular season was what the end result was intended to be. So I think probably what happened is he made some adjustments, maybe get it off a little bit quicker to increase his range to the 3-point line, whatever the reasoning may be. Didn't maybe have enough reps to fully get that into muscle memory, and then hurt his shoulder and kind of adjusted from there as well. So maybe what we ended up seeing was nothing remotely like what they intended it to be. But it is, when he played, there was no question in my mind that he was passing up every open jump shot he was going to take. We talk about this a lot. I've now seen him take some left-handed jump shots in practice because right now he's not cleared to use his right shoulder. So I've seen him take some lefty jumpers in practice. I don't think I've seen him take a real legitimate jump shot since Summer League back in July.
It's crazy.
And I think he took maybe one heave in preseason. Like, I think there might be something in there that would show up on a stat sheet, but that's not a real shot. I haven't seen a legitimate jump shot from him in, 4 months? It's very strange. I don't know entirely what to expect when he comes back. If his shoulder was hurt that much where he needed to take now what's been about 6 weeks off, then why am I going to think that he's just going to come back and his shoulder's going to be fine, he's going to be shooting from the jump? Like, I still worry a little bit when he does come back. Where's that confidence going to be? How's that shoulder going to be? Where's that confidence in the shoulder going to be? Where's the confidence in the form going to be? Like, there's so much coming when he comes back that I have no idea at all what to expect. And for a guy who is so reliant on his jump shot, I right now don't know what to expect from him from the rest of the season, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, for the rest of the season, I don't want to say it's a write-off, because I think that he is good enough to come back and make an impact on this team, particularly off the bench as like a scoring guard. Like, I think that could actually be a really, really valuable piece for the Sixers. But it's hard to expect anything this year. Like, long term, I don't like. I hear, some people, some fans go like, "Hey, we messed up taking Markelle Fultz." I don't think any like rational people really are there yet. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it is a weird conversation to kind of figure out where exactly his fit is within this team, just because theoretically he should be the perfect guard to place next to Ben Simmons, place next to Joel Embiid, place next to Robert Covington. He's a guy who can play both on and off the ball. He can create off the bounce. He can, in college, I should say, he could knock down jump shots. So like that kind of guy, in like those three guys particularly, would be able to cover up for some of the defensive deficiencies that he has, but he also has enough length to, be a weapon and help defense occasionally if he can learn how to do that effectively. He's just the perfect fit for what the 76ers should want from their point guard, or from their, quote unquote, one guard, I guess, if we're going to call Simmons like a 4 or a 3. So like, I am very, very optimistic on this fit. It's just a very bizarre situation that I am going to be fascinated to see play out.
Yeah, for sure. I get a lot of that, maybe we should have taken, Jason Tatum as well, or at least not traded, an additional first round pick to move up and get him, to get Fultz. You haven't seen even a remote like that. That's not even a reasonable facsimile of the Markelle Fultz that they traded up for. That's nothing that like the guy that I scouted at Washington. I do still have the same confidence long term, but I have no expectations this year. And I think that, it's not exactly the first time Sixers fans have been in a position where a highly touted rookie might give you nothing his first year. In fact, Sixers fans are kind of used to that at this point between Noel and Embiid and, Ben Simmons. So it's not going to be the end of the world. But I mean, this is a team right now. And look, maybe they're not 12-9 if, they're I think, 10-5 or something over the last 15 games. Maybe they don't go on that run if Markelle Fultz is playing, because he was hurting that team with the way he was playing and with his reluctance to shoot, and TJ McConnell has stepped in and given them more than they were getting at that spot before. But I think when you look at it, this is still a team that could use another initiator. It's still a team that can use another guy who can really create something out of pick and roll sets, and certainly they can use his spot up shooting that he showed last year. So it would be great if he could come back looking like the prospect they scouted. I still have a ton of confidence in him long term, and a lot of belief in his fit. I just have no real concept of what he's going to give you this year.
Sixers' current starting lineup construction is fascinating to me, in the fact that they're playing Dario Saric with these, essentially massive players in Ben Simmons and Robert Covington and Joel Embiid. Do you think that is a long-term solution to the Sixers front court, or do you think that they might be a little bit better off playing Dario off the bench?
Long term, and you mentioned that lineup. That lineup right now is a plus 20.4 net rating in 154 minutes.
Yep.
I mean, they have been, and up until the Cleveland game, it was much higher than that. They have been devouring people. It's been interesting to watch. They have a defensive rebounding rate. Some of these numbers, 112 minutes or 154 minutes is a decent sample, but it's not yet enough where you would say, like, okay, there's it's enough to remove noise. Like, there's still going to be some hot shooting. There's still going to be some teams that missed open shots. But one of the things that you would look at that lineup and say, okay, that lineup should really rebound the heck out of the ball. They have about an 87% defensive rebounding rate, which is insane. And that should be a
28% offensive rebounding rate, lineup, which is also insane.
They've been destroying people on the glass, which is something you would kind of expect. The passing has been there. The shooting has been there for the most part. Dario is still a little bit inconsistent. Joel isn't shooting it like he did last year, but it's been a really weird combination. And there's a part of me that kind of says, okay, outside of the rebounding, because I do think that Dario contributes to that, especially lately. He's been everywhere on the offensive glass. But there is part of me that wonders, are they succeeding because Redick and Covington and Embiid and Simmons are so good? And how much is Dario contributing to that? I do think long-term, you would look for a guy who's a little more consistent as a three-point shooter, who relies on creating for others a little bit less than Dario does, and who has a little bit more defensive versatility. And, honestly, when Markelle Fultz comes back, he better become a starter. So it's really, do you want to go out and look for another guy to replace Redick, or do you want to slide Saric into that role? And I think you probably want to end up looking for another more wingy type player, a guy who can defend the 2 and the 3 and maybe a little bit of 1 and a 4, a guy like, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's going to be a name. Avery Bradley's going to be a name. On the higher end, Paul George would obviously be every team in the league takes Paul George if he comes to him, but he would be a great conceptual fit. So I think they're probably going to look to address that spot long term and bring Dario off the bench. But for this year, with how effective that lineup has been, I think you kind of just let it play out right now. And look, to start the season, I didn't necessarily like Dario starting with that group. Like I wanted Ben Simmons defending a 4, get him close to the basket, let him push in transition. It hasn't really hurt his defensive rebounding. It hasn't really hurt his ability to push in transition. And Saric has made just enough perimeter shots to kind of make that work. So right now, I'm kind of okay letting it play out, but I do think long-term, Saric probably becomes more of a 6-man type.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the most interesting part of the 76ers and their current, I guess, I don't know, would you call it like, I don't want to say that this is a process anymore. Like it's just kind of like as soon as Sam Hinkie left, I feel like the process changed dramatically. Like it's almost like the 2.0 version of it, but it's a little bit different, right? So sure. I find the most interesting part of this because they have this foundation now of Ben Simmons, Robert Covington, Joel Embiid, and hopefully Markelle Fultz. You just mentioned 3 drastically different players that can fit with them, and I think all 3 of those players would fit incredibly well with that starting lineup. Avery Bradley would fit incredibly well. You could just let him be an absolute bulldog at the point of attack defensively and cause all sorts of issues and knock down 3-pointers. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, same deal. He's a guy who's maybe a little bit more versatile than Avery Bradley as a defender, but he's long. He's able to. He's a little bit, I think, of an overrated shooter. But if you give him maybe some more open shots, that might help. And I think the 76ers would give him more open shots. And then you have Paul George, who's 6'10", who is an incredible offensive creator, who I think would fit really, really well with this group. So that, I think, is the most interesting part for the 76ers. They have so many ways to make this roster better now because they have the foundation in place to where it's going to be easy for them to go out and pluck just basically any free agent they want and say, hey, this guy will work with our foundation.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, they're a team that has, right now I think they have, and it's so much in flux because they have 2 draft picks. Well, potentially 2 draft picks in the Lakers pick and their own draft pick, and the Lakers pick only conveys if it's either number 1 or 6+. So there's a lot of different ways this could go. And another name, let's say something happens with the Lakers pick, Luka Doncic would be. I mean, that's an entirely different discussion, but he would be a blast to watch in that lineup too. But they have all of these, and I almost hate using the word because of the connotation it has with Hinkie, but all these assets, whether that's the Lakers pick or the Kings pick in 2019. Pretty much maximum cap space, which I think they're about $23-24 million, so they have to do a little maneuvering, but not much to get there. And not a whole lot of needs. Like, you look at that and you hope that's 4 starters locked in long term. You're really looking for one guy. And on the one hand, you can be selective because you only have to make that one real move. And you have to make it either 2018 or 2019, because after that, you lose a lot of your cap space to Ben Simmons. But you can be a little bit picky about who you want because you don't have very many needs. But by the same token, you have so much diversity in skill sets that there's also a large group of players who would fit in well. It's going to be, how they navigate this offseason between the draft picks and the cap space. I think it's going to be fun to watch. I'm confident they're going to be very aggressive in free agency. I think they really view 2018 and 2019 as kind of the last shots to add another impact player to this core. And if they do that, it's this could rocket in a big way pretty quickly.
So let's finish up kind of talking about the roster here real quick, just with a couple of guys. Like, I really agree with you. I think TJ McConnell's been great this year. He's been super, super efficient. 52% from three. He's not shooting a ton of threes, but when he takes them, he's knocking them down. Really, really good passer. He limits his turnovers. He's kind of, again, a very good guy to play with Ben Simmons because of the steadiness of his game. He and JJ Redick, to me, have been very, very important in how the 76ers have been able to weather some tough moments that you see them kind of go through as any young team does.
Yeah, I mean, there are moments where Joel Embiid is turnover prone and kind of dominates the ball. There's moments where Ben Simmons has struggled to get to his spots, and the Sixers just have, they have more options. And TJ has been, forget even the shooting, because for the most part, he only shoots when he's wide open, but he's making those, which he never did in previous years. Forget even the passing. His defense has been, that's an element that the Sixers don't really have on the perimeter like that. They don't have somebody to bother a ball handler, 35 feet from the basket. They don't have somebody to really fight over pick and rolls. He's been great in kind of stabilizing that defense. Amir Johnson, who we'll probably get to in a second, has been strong of late in giving them another real smart defender at the rim and in the paint. And JJ, the amount of attention he receives off the ball, forget about whether or not he's taking shots, forget about even whether or not he's making shots. When he comes running off of a baseline screen, or when he's constantly moving, that forces so much attention from the other team that it opens things up for, pretty much everyone on the court.
Yep.
And even just watching him run pick and rolls, and, JJ Redick's not a great pick and roll passer, but teams are so scared of closing out on him that I've seen Embiid get a number of dunks just because, there's so much confusion when you have a shooter of that caliber coming off of a screen in any kind. He's been great, and he's been up and down a little bit. Like, there's probably an adjustment to not playing with Chris Paul. I think that's a very real thing. But the attention he receives has been a real help for the Sixers offense.
Yeah, and the last thing I kind of want to talk about is Amir Johnson, who is fascinating to me, just as a general piece for this team, because, you look at the numbers and they're not very good. He's been efficient in his role. He is averaging, 5 rebounds a game and shooting 50%. But the thing that most impresses me is that he's, picked up some starters minutes when Joel Embiid has sat due to injury. But if you look at his defensive rating right now, in terms of the on-off numbers, it's actually just a point better than Joel Embiid's, which means the team is not losing anything defensively when Embiid steps off the floor. I think that that's really an exaggeration, but I also think it goes to show the idea of how Brett Brown is doing a great job of staggering his starters and managing his team's minutes. So, you look at Amir Johnson's most played lineups, a lot of them at the top of the end here in terms of his minutes played come with Robert Covington and Ben Simmons on the floor. And I think that, Amir Johnson is a good, smart positional defender. And I think he's a smart rim protector. And I think that obviously he does a good job rebounding the basketball. But I think it also goes to show that Brett Brown is kind of managing this team's rotation exceedingly well and finding, ways to, kind of get Joel Embiid minutes on the bench when, other coaches just may not do that. Like, you look at Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers has no idea how to stagger starters. It's just the little stuff with Brett Brown that I think comes out of the woodwork and really impresses you.
Yeah, and Amir's a guy who, at the beginning of the season, he really struggled. And, a lot of people kind of got on that signing. And it was a little bit unfair because you were ignoring the last 5 years and what he was able to show that he can do. And he's really picked it up of late. You referenced that defensive rating of I think it's 98 something. Over the last 5 to 7 games, I feel like that's where that difference has really come in. I feel like the first 10 games, he probably had a horrible defensive rating. Last 5 to 7 has been astronomically good. And he feels a lot more comfortable right now. His rotations seem like, he's real confident in his rotations and where he's supposed to be. He's never going to, leap to block a shot like Joel is. He's never going to cover ground like he is. But he's a smart positional defender. And as a backup big man, that's really what the Sixers want, because the Sixers have struggled with that a lot in the past. We don't even have to talk about Jahlil Okafor, like that's been beaten to death.
To be honest, I don't really have desire to talk about Jahlil.
No, me neither. We talked about him the other day, and to be honest, I almost forgot he was on the team. The only time I remember he's on a team is when he complains about being on the team.
I think that's my thing. Like, it seems like his agent is doing a great job of drumming up sympathy for Okafor in a lot of ways, and that's his agent's job, and I think it's great and good for him for doing that. But I just don't have a whole lot of interest in talking about.
No, me neither. But the Sixers, between Okafor and even Rashawn Holmes, they haven't had a real good positional defender to back Embiid up and to really kind of run the same defensive concepts that they otherwise would have. And I think that familiarity is starting to kick in with Johnson. And look, I can't give Brett Brown enough credit. You look at the defensive schemes that they have, the way they've been able to keep them competitive when Embiid's off the court, especially of late. The way they've executed out of bounds and out of timeouts has been phenomenal this year. And he has been, I think this is one of the years. And again, I came into this stretch and I thought, man, they have a really tough schedule. Like, I hope this isn't something where there's a lot of pressure to mount, because it's going to take some adjustment. There's a lot of young players, a lot of new pieces in Redick and Amir Johnson, and even Jared Bayless, who was out for all but 3 games last year. Like, it's going to take some time to integrate all these people. And for it to kind of coalesce as quickly has been it's been fun to watch, and I think a real staple to Brett Brown.
So before I let you go, Derek, I want to get some NBA draft stuff from you. Derek is, for those who don't know, one of the smarter NBA draft analysts out there whenever he decides to put his mind to that. Obviously, with The Athletic launching and him being an integral piece of that puzzle, he hasn't gotten a chance to watch a crazy amount of college basketball yet. But I think that it's going to be interesting to at least get some of his ideas on what the 76ers should be looking for with the potential of this Lakers pick transferring to them. So has anyone kind of stood out to you? And obviously, for those who don't know, kind of give us the, parameters on this Lakers pick, and give us everything that you kind of feel about the draft going forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, I haven't spent as much time on the draft this year yet because of launching the site. But I still, the draft is probably it might be my favorite part of basketball, just because of how integral in it and how, quite frankly, difficult it is. Like, every year I feel like, man, I look back, I really make it an effort to look back at my old rankings. And every year I look back at my rankings and I think, have I learned nothing over the past decade? Like, how can this possibly be that I'm so bad at it? But then I look at everybody else's ranking and, hey, we all get this wrong. And I think that challenge of it really keeps me engaged. And it's to me, one of the most fun things about basketball.
Well, yeah, like the thing that I talk about and this is a conversation I have with Mark Few regularly at Gonzaga. Like, Mark and I could not have more divergent opinions on the NBA draft process. And what he calls it essentially a venture capital, firm or a venture capital idea, to where you're essentially just treating these players as stock assets or, investments to try and, figure out how they're going to mature. We don't know how this is going to work, but you can be informed and you can do the homework and you can do everything you need to do and at least come away with, an informed guess. Like, if you talk to any venture capitalist, there are investments that they feel good about, but it's very rare for them to have a sure thing lock that they feel great about. So, yeah, it's kind of that kind of deal. So you just kind of got to get more wrong than you get right, I think.
Yeah. Well, even that's difficult sometimes, especially when you get out of the first 2 or 3. But no, it's like I've certainly watched a lot of these guys a couple times each. I'm not sure my opinions are going to be too strong. Like, I'm still very much in an exploratory phase. But so going back to the Lakers pick, because you brought that up, Sixers get it if it's number 1 overall, and the Sixers get it if it's 6 or later. So basically, it conveys to the Lakers if it's between 2 and 5 in this year's draft. If not, they get the better of the Sixers or the Kings pick in 2019, assuming the better pick isn't number 1 overall, because if it's number 1 overall, then they'll get the lesser of 2 picks. So with that out of the way, that was a mouthful. Basically you're saying, okay, if it's the number 1 pick, who would you like? And if it's in the kind of the 6 through 10 range, who do you like? Number one, I already said Doncic. I think Doncic would probably be number one on my board right now.
Yep.
Even team agnostic, but I mean, with the Sixers who need a 2-guard, who need another guy who, I think Doncic has a very projectable shot long term. And I mean, his passing and his ball movement would be exceptional on his team. He would be, to me, a pretty clear number one on my big board. And I don't have anything approaching a Sixers-focused big board right now, but he's a very logical number one.
As someone who has thought about this, I think that he makes the most sense for them very clearly at number one.
Yeah, he's fit. And just in terms of watchability, that team would be, I'd love covering that team. Low chance of happening, but I'd love it happening. I think one of the interesting things, because look, Amir Johnson, he's playing well, but he's 30-31 and on a 1-year deal. He's not part of the long-term future. Rashawn Holmes has one more year after this one, and then you kind of have to make a decision. His defense has never really progressed like I think a lot of people would have hoped for. And when you take Amir Johnson out, the Sixers, their defense, well, the defense without Embiid, with the exception of Amir lately, has always struggled. So I think a big man, and look, you don't draft a player number 6 overall to be a backup. Like that's something that regularly happens. But I do at least consider the possibility because, I mean, to be honest, many of the players in that range are big men. And the Sixers do kind of have a little more of a need for it, both to back up Embiid, but also a little bit of insurance, not for a season-ending injury because Embiid's season is over, so is the Sixers, but just in the instance where he might miss 20 games because they're overly protective or whatnot. So I think you might prioritize that a little bit more. So looking at those guys, Ayton, I think I've been very disappointed in, like his instincts offensively, and
wow.
They've been atrocious. And you look at the body and you go, man, I really hope he doesn't waste that kind of physical tools. I do like Bamba a lot. And again, for a guy who you would draft 6, 7, 8 overall, you don't necessarily, he doesn't project to be a backup. Like, you're not drafting him to be that long term, but he does have I do think he has the ability to grow his outside shot. And I mean, that 7'9" wingspan or whatever it is just insane physical tools. I think he has the shoulders to get stronger. I kind of like him. I'm not sure where he's going to end up going, but I like him. I like Jaren Jackson in terms of versatility. Like, I think he would be, I think he has a projectable 3-point shot, and I think he can defend a couple of positions. I think he can protect the rim and defend the pick and roll. So I think he would be an interesting fit if that jump shot does come around. Sexton, I mean, how can you not love a guy who wins 3-on-5 matchups? I mean, that was just one of the most insane situations I've ever seen in my life. But I like him. I think people might get the notion that he's a gunner, but I think he's more than that. I think one of the main takeaways I had from that game wasn't so much like, wow, he can get his shot whenever he wants, but his communication when they were in that spot was really good. And he was directing his teammates and putting them in spots and giving them a chance to succeed. And he seems like he has a little bit of that leadership mentality. He'll get after it on the defensive side of the court. So even though he's not, you're not going to draft a 6'2" guard really to put on his team. It might work a little bit because Fultz has, he's 6'4" with an otherworldly wingspan. But I think at this point, I'm mostly moving away from fits and just guys that I like. I like him quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I think that the guy I like most for the Sixers outside of Doncic, I think Michael Porter would be fascinating for them, just in the same way that we kind of talked about with Paul George, right? Like a big 6'10" creator who can knock down shots from 3 and just kind of be a Dario Saric who can shoot a little bit, The next guy for me, I think, would be Jaren Jackson. Like, he is awesome, I think. Like, he would be the perfect fit for their defensive scheme. He's so smart, closes out under control, has potential more than is polished as a rim protector at this stage, I would say. But when you're 6'11" with a 7'4" wingspan and you weigh 230 pounds already at 18 years old, and he's a young 18 years old, like, you have a high ceiling in terms of what coaches can bring out of you, especially given the fact that he has shown that he is exceedingly coachable as well.
Right.
Bamba, I'm not a huge fan of for the Sixers, I would say, just because, I guess he would help their defense, but I just think there are better fits. Like, I think you could play Jaren Jackson with Joel Embiid. I don't think you can play Mohamed Bamba with Joel Embiid. DeAndre Ayton, kind of the same deal. And, with the 76ers, I don't think you need to take home run swings with this pick. I think you need to just kind of make sure you hit this pick. Couple of other interesting guys, I would say, later on, I really like what Mikal Bridges has done so far this year. And I think that his length would be very interesting in that, aforementioned mix of just long athletic defenders that the 76ers already have employed. Kevin Knox, if you believe like I can that Kevin Knox is going to be a shooter one day, I think that he also makes a lot of sense for the 76ers in much of the same ways that Dario Saric and Michael Porter do. He's just kind of a little bit worse than those guys right now, to be honest. Sexton is a fascinating one to me. I don't really know what to make of his potential fit on the 76ers yet.
No, I don't think the fit's necessarily there. I do agree with you on Knox. Knox was another guy I had in there. And Porter, to be honest, I forgot about. He played 2 minutes. He would be a fascinating case. I really wanted to see what he would do at Missouri this year. Just a lot of the knocks on him coming in, and clearly you see the talent, and you always want to play bigger if you can, and you always want those guys who can be big and tall and rebound, but also then give you the passing and the skill set. I wanted to see whether he could grow as kind of a shot creator. I wanted to see if he could be a more consistent defender and a rebounder and really get in there and compete down low. And it's a shame that we're not going to be able to get to see that. I would have really been interested to see whether or not, it's so tough to scout these guys in high school. It's the environments are a lot of times not the most conducive to that. So it would have been great to have more information on him, but clearly from a talent and a skill set standpoint, he fits quite a bit. And I mean, Bridges, of course, and Philadelphia would absolutely love that, considering where he plays. But his growth and his shot over the years, and sometimes you see these upperclassmen, and he's now a junior, where the shot improves. But I mean, he shot 39% last year. He made that improvement last year. Yeah, I have as a shooter, as a versatile defender, he's absolutely a fit.
I think that's about all I got for you, Derek. Do you have any other at random NBA hot takes that you feel the need to kind of just get off your chest right now?
I don't think I have hot takes. No. It's been, there's a lot of surprises, and I don't know how many of them I really believe. And you've already seen Orlando come back crashing down to earth real quickly. Detroit, who the Sixers play later tonight, I'm not sure exactly when this will be released, but they play them on Saturday night. I had not 100% bought in on them. I do think Bradley's a good fit, but it'll be interesting to watch which one of these kind of real good stories. You can throw in the Knicks in there. You can throw in the Wolves. They're unexpected, but they're still young and on the rise. The Sixers young and on the rise. We all know what the season ultimately comes down to. You kind of have to look for stories outside of the NBA championship in this day and age. And I think some of these young teams that could be replacing the old guard, they're kind of the ones that kind of have my focus and my attention. And for so far this season, that's been those have been good storylines to follow. Yeah,
I think that this is not a transition year just because the Warriors are going to win the NBA title. I feel confident saying that. So I don't think it's a transition year where you're going from at the top, one team passing the torch to another. But underneath that kind of top tier, I do think that you're starting to see those, younger teams, as you mentioned, bubbling to the surface and starting that transition. It might come next year. It might come the year after that. But, I think you're starting to kind of see that transition, make its first little bubblings of noise.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's like you said, the top's not changing. Certainly not this year. Maybe when LeBron makes his next decision, that might be the case. But maybe the 50-win teams might be shuffling a little bit. And watching, like I said, it probably goes back to how much I enjoy the draft. But watching some of these young teams rise is really fun, and this seems to be a good year for that.
Do we need to talk about LeBron to the 76ers?
No, I don't. The Sixers make an interesting offer in free agency because let's say they win 45 games, they make the playoffs. They're clearly on the rise. You got Embiid and Simmons to lure people in. They could have max cap space. But no, I do not. LeBron's next decision might be one of my least favorite storylines. And I already know that if the Sixers keep improving, there's going to be a lot of talk locally about that. I don't need to talk too much more about it. If it happens, great, we'll talk about it. But having to lure LeBron seems like a messy offseason.
Derek, tell the people where they can find your work. I think we've said it enough during this show, but just remind them.
Yeah, theathletic.com. Right now, mostly Philly. Eventually, hopefully, some college basketball and draft stuff. And Twitter at Derek Bodner, NBA.
Please remember to go subscribe to The Athletic. Please remember to go subscribe to the Game Theory podcast. Also subscribe to Sixers Beat over on the CLNS network with Derek.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, Derek's been, Derek's a great writer, great analyst, and a great human being. So I'm very glad that we got a chance to have him on. This has been the Game Theory podcast, like I said. And we'll be back at some point later in the week. We'll do our breakdown with Cole Zwicker of the prospects. It hasn't been a great week for that necessarily. I think we might hold off until Wednesday after DeAndre Ayton plays Big Bob Williams with Texas A&M. So until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.